Thank you, Brad. Thank you everyone for coming out. I would like to point out that we do have our hashtag RIT9 up on the whiteboards, as well as the Twitter handles for the candidates that are here tonight. To get started off, I'd like you to take just 60 seconds and introduce yourself to the room.
We just Rochambeaued and I won. My name is Erin McGann. I am the only non-incumbent running for District 9. I currently work for the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. I have a background in finance. I oversaw multi-million-dollar trades for a couple different mutual fund companies before the tech crash, the first one, a zillion years ago. And I also oversaw $25 million in contracts for the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, auditing them for compliance with the contracts. I currently run a reentry program, working to bring criminal offenders out of prison and back into society in an effective way so that they won't go back to prison. And I supervise 20 people around the state. Thank you.
Hey, I'm Chris Riley. I'm serving on the City Council now. I've been serving on the council since 2009. I was born and raised here in Austin, grew up going to Austin Public Schools, and I gotta just say how exciting it is to me as a lifelong Austinite to be here at Capital Factory. This is one of the most exciting places in the city of Austin, in Central Texas. This is really the center of so much innovation. I always love being out here because this is what Austin ought to be all about. We ought to be a city that embraces innovation, that works with our local community to come up with cool solutions. And I'm especially excited to be talking about solutions on transportation because I haven't actually owned a car since 2008, and so I'm totally into innovative transportation solutions like those we're talking about tonight. And I just want to thank all of y'all for being here in the room to talk about that stuff because this is fun, and there's so much to talk about. I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you for joining me.
I think we can do that. Let's go ahead and jump right in. We're going to kind of go on the fly here. The first half hour will be transportation-related questions. The second will be a little bit of mishmash of a couple other things that are facing the city. For each question ahead of time, I'll let you know. Most of them are 2 minutes and then a 1 minute follow-up or just a 1 minute short answer type question, just to keep things moving. Brad will have the time here if you start wondering how much time I have left. First question is the big question on Proposition 1. If you support the proposed bond package, can you explain why a more expensive rail line is significantly better than implementing a less expensive Metro Rapid-style bus service along the same route until the necessary development occurs? If you don't support it, what do you think the city should spend the money on instead? Councilmember Riley.
You know, I do support the rail proposal that's on the ballot. I also support the light rail proposal we had in 2000. I think Guadalupe and Lamar would be a great corridor for rail, and I hope to get it on there someday. I do think that the proposal that's before us offers a lot of opportunity. There's, as you all know, there's 100,000 people living within a half mile of those transit stops today. There's huge potential for having more people living along that line in the future, focusing on nodes like Highland, Hancock, the St. David's area, the medical school, and I don't think we would see the same results there with a bus rapid transit line. I was excited to have our BRT lines in place. I supported the 801 launching in January. Was excited to celebrate the launching of the 803 this morning. Actually, it launched yesterday, but we had the official celebration this morning, and I was so glad to be able to participate in that. And so BRT is great where you can get it, but frankly, it doesn't produce the same kind of results that we get from rail investments because people just aren't willing to invest the same kind of, like you're not going to see, I don't think BRT is going to support a major overhaul of Hancock Center, for instance. I don't think having buses up there are going to lead to that. And in general, the capacity, what we have learned is that the capacity served by a bus line, even a BRT line, would not be what we need, what we could get with rail. And so I do support having approving the rail investments on the ballot in November. More importantly, I support whatever alternative transportations we can get on the ground. This is the one we have an opportunity to get now. And it has been a long time coming. I know a lot of y'all have participated in the long process leading up to having that on the ballot. It will, if this goes down, it will be a while. I will fully join with you in working towards some other thing that will get better reception in the community, and I look forward to that. But the real thing is I just look forward to getting meaningful transportations in place now. This is the opportunity we have now to get started on a comprehensive network, and I'm voting for it.
Do you want Kathy to come up and catch up?
Yes. take a quick 60 seconds just to introduce yourself to the room.
Sure, thanks. I'll start by saying I'm Kathy Tobo, and I'm a candidate for District 9. I've served on the Austin City Council since 2011, and I apologize for being late. I hope someone explained that I was at another candidate event and that was previously scheduled. So I moved here in '91. I moved here to go to school at the University of Texas and received a PhD from there, and have worked at a cultural arts nonprofit. I've taught higher ed for a while, and I've done some other things along the way. I am focused on affordability, on education, on quality of life issues, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you. Thanks.
Before you answer, our first question is about the proposed rail bond. If you support the proposed rail package, can you explain why a more expensive rail line is significantly better than implementing a less expensive Metro Rapid style bus service along the same route until the necessary development occurs? If you do not, what do you think the city should spend the money on instead? And you'll have 2 minutes to answer.
I do not support the current rail proposal. I did live in Boston for a long time and loved having a rail system that, of course, was built a million years ago, and we used a lot of unpaid labor to do that. So our rail is going to be very expensive. It's substantially more expensive than 2 rail lines that have recently been built, one in Houston, one in Denver. This rail line is not going to substantially change the look of traffic in the city, as it won't be ready for at least 10 years, and in that time our population will grow to about 1 million people within the city limits if we continue growing at our current rate. I do think that a rapid bus line would be much better served there. We could also be able to create a web of rapid lines around the city that stem from park and rides around the city. So if I'm given $1 billion to create something, I don't really want to have that $1 billion because it's going to substantially raise everybody's taxes. But if I was magically given $1 billion, this is what I would do with it. I would create park and rides all around the city. I would improve the infrastructure for the those park and rides that are already out there, so that there's lights and sidewalks and it's safe to get across the streets where you need to cross the street. And I would create a network of buses that run through the city in a manner that is safe and good for people, that get them where they want to go. And I wouldn't necessarily only use big buses. We can use smaller buses. We can use, we don't have to always have a giant bus that has 3 people on it. We could have a small bus that has 3 people on it and be much more cost effective.
I was part of the unanimous council decision to support the strategic mobility plan, as well as to support putting the urban rail item on the ballot, and I do plan to vote for it and support it. We certainly have a transportation problem in this city, and we certainly have a traffic problem. There's no doubt about that, and we need to be really looking at all the ways to improve it. And bus rapid transit is one way, and I think we should continue to support that. It's very clear we need to continue to invest in our sidewalk infrastructure, in our bike lanes, in encouraging work from home options, and encouraging other kinds of staggered schedules. We need to take aim at traffic from all of those angles. But certainly, I believe that urban rail is, number one, an appropriate question to ask the voters about this fall, to ask them whether they support that investment and whether they feel that the benefits that are promised from it warrant that significant public investment. But I do believe it will make a difference. I understand it's not the route everybody wanted to see be the first route, but I believe it will be a good start in that direction, and that we can build on it, and that it will ultimately be one part of an improvement plan for our city.
We're going to move on. Ms. McGann, I'm going to start with you. Sort of round robin around. The 803 Rapid Service started yesterday. A little while back, I had a conversation with Cap Metro about some of the shortcomings of the 801 Metro Rapid Service. In the response, it was pointed out that Metro Rapid buses have signal prioritization technology to hold the green lights a little longer, because the city actually owns the signals, quote, we can only get the bus optimization to the extent that they allow it. Same goes for dedicated lanes. Cap Metro doesn't have the authority to create those lanes. Given the less than impressive numbers from Metro Rapid's rollout, how do you think the city could be more proactive in working with Cap Metro to implement and expand new services and help them have a better chance of success? I'll give you 2 minutes.
I think that wherever the city can work with Capital Metro, they should be working with Capital Metro. So if it is on putting in bus lanes, I think they should do that. I think the city should be putting curb cuts wherever we can so that the buses pull off the road so that regular traffic can keep flowing and it doesn't cause backups. The increasing, I think I already said this, the increasing the green light time would be fantastic. I have all sorts of issues with the green lights downtown, so I won't even go there, but having a better timing on those lights just in general would help traffic downtown. And having the, what was the other thing you talked about? The other issue you talked about?
I mentioned specifically dedicated lanes.
Dedicated lanes. I would love to see dedicated lanes instead of MOPAC being, and I don't know how much the city has to do with this part, but having a toll lane on MOPAC. I would rather see an HOV bus lane on MOPAC. I think that would be much more effective for A, getting people to carpool, and B, getting the buses to be able to move on MOPAC.
Thank you. Certainly, we work very closely with Capital Metro. We have several council members, including Chris, who serve on the Cap Metro board, and this is one way that we address issues that require joint coordination. I know our transportation staff is very committed to making sure that the signalization works well with the buses. One other way in which we could certainly improve our coordination is making sure that when we're doing something like rolling out dedicated bus lanes in parts of downtown, that we also are in at the same time undergoing significant construction projects that are also closing lanes and closing side streets. The concerns that I heard in my office earlier this year surrounded that people were having difficulty adjusting to the dedicated bus lanes. At the same time, they were also navigating some of the changed circumstances downtown. And so that to the extent that we can also coordinate those kinds of projects and make sure that people can move as smoothly as possible around all parts of our town, I think the better.
I will take some responsibility for the Metro Rapid lines. I have been serving on Cap Metro since I was elected. In fact, currently the chair of Capital Metro is Councilmember Martinez, and I serve as vice chair of Capital Metro. And I'm deeply involved in many aspects of planning the Metro Rapid lines. It's not a perfect system. I use it often, and I fully recognize it's not ideal. But I think we ought to step back and pause and recognize exactly what it has meant. It is actually a pretty big achievement when you look at that. We got with the installation of those lines, we got down just looking at downtown. For the first time, we got dedicated transit lanes downtown. We got new bike lanes on both Guadalupe and Lavaca. That entailed removing a lot of parking. That involved getting doing the traffic signal prioritization outside downtown, getting the real-time arrival information at those bus stops. That was a huge advance. So in many respects, the 801 and now the 803 have been groundbreaking in terms of the history of Austin transportation. Now, it's not a done deal. In fact, we talked with people we had experts from Great Britain over here talking to us about that line as it was in the final stages of planning. And what they emphasize is you can't just view this as a finished product on launch, and it is not. It will always continue to be a work in progress. I am very hopeful that we will be able to extend those dedicated transit lanes outside downtown. And I think we will be able to make a solid case. This morning, as I rode the bus in, I noticed as I arrived that just looking back at those lanes, it was solid buses. I mean, nobody could complain about those lanes being empty because they were filled with buses. And I think as we've got the ridership to support additional buses, we will see a growing acceptance and recognition of the value of having those dedicated bus lanes. And you will see more and more of it. And on the MOPAC improvement project, those are actually available to buses. They go for free on those managed lanes. So now, for the first time, we will be able to run buses on MOPAC, and the same thing is in the works in the planning for I-35. So you will be seeing more and more of that. But really, it was the 801 and now the 803 that made those critical first steps on getting a system like that in place.
While you still have the mic, I want to do a quick 1-minute follow-up with each of you. How, as a city, do we create a true constituency for better transit service? Specifically looking at things like dedicated right-of-way or future rail expansions, we're going to get a lot of political pushback. How do you propose that we build that constituency to mitigate some of those down and dirty lanes? Sure.
for me first? Okay, well, a lot of it we can get a lot done just by working cooperatively with employers on a one-on-one basis, and Cat Metro now has dedicated staff that are at work doing that, and we now have a TMA, Transportation Management Association, now called Movability, that is focused exactly on that, trying to get our mode share up for transit higher than it is now. But more importantly, what is really going to make the difference is changing the transit experience. And the thing that I am most excited about in that regard is what we have coming up at the end of the year. For the first time at the end of the year, Cat Metro will actually know where all of its buses are. You would think we would have known that some time ago. But we will actually have the GPS devices on each bus, so that we will be able to make that data available to folks who can use it to create apps, so that when you go to ride the bus, you will be able to actually look at your phone and see where the bus is. There will be no more of this craning your neck trying to see, is it coming? Has it already come? You will know it, and I believe that is going to so significantly change the transit experience from the standpoint of the customer comfort and convenience, that you're going to see a growing mode share. I'm very hopeful that working collaboratively with the tech sector, as we already have been for some time now on this, to make that data available in better forms, that we will get better and better at that, and you'll see a growing acceptance of transit as it becomes more convenient for the user.
Thank you. Ms. McGann?
I think Chris hit it on the head with his last comment. It has to be convenient for the user. We also need to be working with the largest employer downtown, who is the state of Texas, giving them incentives, to the employees incentives to ride the bus. The majority of people that work for the state do not live in downtown. They come in from outside. And so if we could get them using park and rides and coming downtown and using the bus system and that kind of thing, it would be a great improvement. So I think convenience, but also working with the state, because they have the largest number of stakeholders, possible stakeholders here in the downtown area.
I certainly agree that having a convenient, accessible, consistent public transportation system is key to our success. I would also say cost is an issue as well, because we really need to make sure that transit-dependent Austinites have the ability to continue to ride the bus, and when urban rail comes, that it is accessible to them as well. And frankly, we've certainly heard concerns from individuals who ride the bus regularly that the increases over the last few years have taken a toll on their monthly budget. So continuing to offer, I believe the question was about building a constituency for public transportation. And so I would say, considering all of those factors and continuing some of the public dialogues that have happened as part of Project Connect, I believe there certainly have been some challenges to that discussion, and some of those who are most supportive of public transportation have left those conversations feeling as if their voices weren't heard as clearly, and have not had as much input into the final product as possible. And I believe continuing to have public discussions is important to kind of rebuild what should be a natural constituency.
We're going to start with you on this one. Recently, many subsidized or below-market affordable housing developments have been located on the fringes of Austin, far from transit, quality schools, and job centers. How will you ensure that subsidized housing programs are being placed near transit?
Sure, thanks. It's certainly an important question to consider, where the proximity of affordable housing developments and transportation. And that's been a goal. In fact, when we started to have this conversation on council, we got some information from staff about how closely, about where our investments, our public investments have been, and actually they are in relatively close proximity, in some cases very close proximity to public transportation. But it is a more complicated equation than that. And in my conversations with Foundation Communities Director Walt Moreau, he pointed out, for their family-oriented developments, they have really two kinds of product. One, tend to be single-room occupancy developments, and then the other product they offer is family-friendly units that are typically occupied by families with children. Something like 90% of those individuals have cars. Now, yes, maybe they have cars because they are not in close proximity to public transportation. But even the Foundation Communities development that is right next to M Station has about an 80% rate of of residents who own cars. And part of that is because people have need to also make decisions about housing based on the quality of the schools in their area, based on where they work, based on access to childcare. And so it is very important that we consider our affordable housing locations and site choices and our public investments with a consideration for all of those factors. And a couple of the projects that I think became controversial because of because they were not located as closely to public transportation as they might have been, were, on the other hand, located in areas with very high-performing schools and with access, very close access, to large numbers of jobs. And those are also important considerations for where we should make our public investments in affordable housing.
Well, it's a fun question for this race, because as many of y'all know, Councilmember Tovo and I have had a very public disagreement over this issue. You know, as someone who is a big supporter of transit, it's very important to me that we are very careful with our scarce dollars that are available to support affordable housing, and that we make sure that we do not devote those dollars to creating slums that are car dependent. And that is a very real risk, that we will be creating very cheap housing in places that is isolated from transit. The reason that has become a risk just lately within the past year or so is because we have moved away from our commitment. Early on in our affordable housing program, Austin was a national leader in focusing on smart housing, and the T, that was an acronym, SMART, the safe, mixed income, accessible, reasonably priced, and transit-oriented. And we took that T very seriously. We had very serious requirements about how it would be transit-related. Unfortunately, we didn't actually create a definition for that. We left it to the housing director to define what is transit-related. And now what we found is that as demand for places near transit has gone up, the cheapest land has become the land that is isolated from transit, that has no transit service. And if you're the housing director and it's your job to identify as much land that get the most housing as you can on the ground, you're going to go for that cheap land that's removed from transit. And so we are creating this affordable housing with no access to transit. And I just think that's wrong. I think that as we've got scarce resources, we want to make sure that people, low-income people, have access to transit. Transit, as y'all know, is a very significant expense, especially for low-income people. It is for nationwide, it tends to be the second biggest expense after housing. In fact, for many low-income people, it can be the single biggest expense. I think it's very important to locate that close to transportation. And I have undertaken several initiatives to get it to make progress on that, to recommit to making sure that all of our housing has access to transportation, and I'm going to continue my commitment to do that.
As both my opponents have stated, it is important to have transportation near housing. One of the things that bus routes allow us to do is change where our buses go. We can't really do that with rail. Once it's set, it's set. But we can look and see where we need an extra bus route, what we need to do, can we add that on when we're looking at inexpensive housing opportunities. We can also, as a city council, require a certain number of units that are established for protected elder housing, protected low-income housing, moderate income housing, so that we can create communities. You all may be aware that Austin State School looks like it's likely to be closed by the legislature this year, and so the city will have the opportunity to take bids on that. And that's what I would like to see, is that we have a myriad of different housing over there. Of course, we have to fix the infrastructure, because 35th Street is going to be crazy with lots of extra people there. But yes, we have to have transportation with our affordable housing, and I think that buses are the way to do that because they're more easily moved.
This is a quick 1-minute question for each of you. The extension of meter hours downtown has helped a little with creating parking availability, but on a crowded weekend night, on-street parking is still pretty much impossible to find. Other cities like San Francisco have been very successful using variable pricing to create more on-street parking availability, raise revenue, reduce traffic for people circling around for parking. Would you support a similar variable pricing initiative? If so, how can we start? If not, do you have an alternate proposal?
I love that question. I love that you would ask that question. You know, it is a very exciting time in the world of parking, and I don't often get asked a question. You know, the reason they're talking about that is because there's a crazy professor out in California, Professor Donald Shoup, at UCLA, who wrote a book in 2005 about the high cost of free parking, and it launched a revolution in parking. And I have been committed to moving forward in every way that we can with Dr. Shoup's principles here. And you guys probably may know about him. He's got followers all over the country. They call him Shoupistas. Now we actually brought Dr. Shoup here to Austin, and where he gave some talks. He's on a first name basis with my Leah back there. We're always in touch on our progress on parking initiatives. I've actually provided a copy of the high cost of free parking to everyone who had agreed to read one, and many who didn't. It's just because I'm so excited about the progress we can make on that. And sure, variable pricing is one that we ought to look at. I will say San Francisco went a little bit further. They got a federal grant to do some really innovative stuff that doesn't really make sense in every city. This is but it is a great laboratory. And the most important thing is to be open to change on parking, because it has huge implications for the way our cities look and feel and function. And that's what Dr. Shoup called attention to. It tends to be the single biggest land use in any city, has major implications on the accessibility and convenience and the walkability of any urban setting. We can do much better, and variable pricing may be one part of a solution as we move forward. I know we can do better with our parking policy than we have done. That's why if you go to my webpage and look at on the city's website and look for the resolutions that I've sponsored, you'll find a number of different items related to parking. It is a battle. People take parking very seriously. It is a very touchy issue for many people, but I think there is a lot of very positive work that can be done on the parking front. I've made some headway now, and I hope to continue making headway on parking, and variable parking may well be part of it.
Councilmember Riley's enthusiasm for parking, you can have 90 seconds.
I'm not sure I can work up quite as much enthusiasm for parking. I do still own a car and have to find parking, so. But we absolutely, variable pricing for parking is a great idea. I also think that if we have parking rides outside the city, then people who are coming in from outside the city will ride the buses in. If we increase the number of buses that run late at night, then we can also reduce the number of people that are feeling like they need to drive home at 3 in the morning, and so they won't need to find parking. I also think that we can probably make deals with all of those empty lots that are down here in the evenings, and figure out some way to share the land wealth with the state, because there's a number of parking lots that are down here in the evenings that are vacant. So those are my ideas.
So we have taken some steps as a city with regard to parking in the last couple of years, and I want to talk about meters for just a minute. Before I got on council, and then immediately afterward, the council had adopted, prior to my getting on, had adopted a resolution to move forward with parking meters downtown in certain areas at certain times on certain days, and there was a lot of concern about it. And the concern was coming from musicians who need to be downtown and need to have their cars downtown for their jobs. They were coming from people who like to come downtown to hear music or to go to restaurants. And there was a lot of concern about the cost. And so I believe that something like variable pricing with regard to meters needs a lot more discussion and a lot more study before Austin ought to step forward and move in that direction. We are starting to move in a direction where it's becoming more expensive for people to come downtown, and it's something that our businesses are talking about too. In fact, I just came from a meeting where in the conversation afterward, several people said, we are making it more and more difficult for people to drive downtown, more costly between the construction and the meters and taking away the parking spaces. I'm hearing from my businesses that they have customers who are now choosing other alternatives, and that's a very serious consideration. Austin needs to remain a place for that's appealing not just to tourists, not just to visitors, but also to people who live and work and play here all the time, and we need to be able to embrace them downtown as well. So some other options I would consider are exploring, continuing to encourage our businesses that have primarily daytime users to consider opening up their parking lots in the evenings, and I believe that's happening, but perhaps encouraging more of them. Considering also looking at ways to potentially create some more public parking garages that are publicly owned, or continuing to look toward our parking enterprise funds would be alternatives I prefer.
Thank you. Ms. McGee, we'll start with you. Just a quick 1 minute to wrap up the transportation section. What city budget public spending priority, or what would you prioritize for the next term as it pertains to bike, sidewalk, pedestrian, you name it?
Do I have to pick one?
You have 60 seconds.
Okay. I think that we really need to work on the basic infrastructure in our city. Our sidewalks are kind of a mess. Everybody's seen the sidewalk that stops and goes nowhere. We don't have enough lighting in our city. It's the basic infrastructure that I'm concerned about. So included in that, I have bike lanes, sidewalks, lights, even roads. And I was at one meeting where a man said, "There's been a pothole in front of my house for 4 years. Why can't somebody come and fix it?" Well, yeah, that's a really good question. Why can't somebody come and fix it? And so we need to work on that basic infrastructure in our city. Because people aren't safe right now. There's a number of areas in the city where it's really easy to trip and fall just running down the street. I'm a marathon runner. I've got scars all over my knees from tripping over the sidewalks that are crooked. The bicyclists that I know, I'm not an avid biker, but the bicyclists that I do know complain that a lot of the bike lanes are either blocked or they're filled with trash cans and things, so it's difficult to use them. So we need to work on those kinds of things in order to make the city more transportation, like any kind of transportation, happy. Bikes, feet, cars, all that stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think they're all important. And if you ask the public, you'll get different answers depending on what mode of transportation somebody is more likely to take. When I served on the Families and Children Task Force before coming on council, one of the things that we did was to have focus groups around the city. And again, the thing people talked about most, they want bike lanes. They, of course, want roads with less traffic on them, but they talked again and again about sidewalks. We have, as you know, millions and millions and millions of dollars of missing sidewalk, as our public works director says. And since we talked a little bit earlier about the housing transportation issue, let me just also point out that the resolution, the code change that's going forward to make sure that affordable housing is more closely located to transportation also took aim at sidewalks. And if this goes forward as planned, we'll also have a situation where we can't make public investments in affordable housing unless there is a sidewalk already in place. Despite the fact that our public works director got up and said, well, we work with housing all the time. If there's an affordable housing investment going in here, we can certainly target our sidewalk dollars to that area, to that development. We will be in a situation where, despite our goal of locating affordable housing for all kinds of people in all parts of town, we're going to be throwing up obstacles to creating that housing in most parts of town unless they already have sidewalks.
A lot to cover. I got to start with two quick things on parking because I realized I didn't mention them. First, variable pricing. A big part of variable pricing is allowing the price to go down as well as up. In fact, Seattle, which has variable pricing, most of the time they're adjusting it variably and taking the price down because they don't have the capacity that requires the prices that they were charging. And secondly, I do have, for those of you who are interested in parking, I do have an item this Thursday directing the city to get control of its own parking resources downtown, because we have garages that are just sitting unused, and we can make those available to the public and efficient use of resource. Getting to the transportation questions, most of the work we need to be doing on transportation relates to alternative transportation, because that's the key to the future. We can't expect everybody to drive in their own vehicles to get everywhere they're going to need to be going, because the system doesn't work. We need to focus on alternatives, and that includes biking, that includes sidewalks, that includes all kinds of modes, maybe urban rail, buses, whatever bus systems we have in place. All of those need a lot of attention. Sidewalks are absolutely a huge issue. I'm very proud of the progress we've made with Chem Metro working collaboratively with the city, and I want to make sure we continue that progress.
Thank you. We'll start with Councilmember Tobo on this one. We're going to transition a little bit to part of the ARA platform is for abundant housing. So this question, I apologize, is a little long, but I didn't write it, so I'm going to According to the 2014 Comprehensive Housing Market Analysis by the city, many Austin residents made economic trade-offs to live in the city. 69% of homeowners paid more for their home to live in the city of Austin. Living downtown makes it easier for people to walk and bike, reducing the city's traffic burden and carbon footprint. Residential density downtown is what makes B-cycle possible. when new buildings like Seaholm are put up for sale, so many people want to buy the condos, they sell out in a week. What can we do to change policy and tone from how to contain condos and apartments to how we can create enough of them to allow all the people who want the benefit of downtown living to enjoy it? What are the obstacles you see to creating more residents downtown, and what can we do to remove these obstacles? And you can have 2 minutes.
Okay, thanks. Well, we have policies downtown that certainly encourage that kind of density, and I think what you're seeing in recent years are the results of those policies, and more condos coming online. But we do need to pay attention to the other kind of factors that make areas great places to live. Services and other kinds of amenities, public space and open space. And those are areas where I believe we need to focus more attention. We do have some public spaces downtown that have not been well maintained. We have some efforts underway. For example, the master planning that's going on at Republic Square Park, the beginnings of the plannings that are going on at Palm Park and Waller. These are all the kinds of services that people need. If you're going to live in close proximity, you really do need the ability to get out and access public spaces, green spaces, and some of the other kinds of things, like, for example, a grocery store and some of the other, and restaurants and some of the other services that are starting to come in as a result of, in part, as it's a symbiotic relationship. As you get more residents downtown to support those businesses, that encourages others to come in.
Well, this is a very important issue to me. As somebody who's been living downtown since 1990, I fully appreciate the value of having more people living here downtown. Back then there weren't a lot of people living downtown, and I'm very proud of the progress we've made in rebuilding the community that used to exist downtown. We're actually, in terms of number of units, we're now well beyond the historic records. We're still not where we used to be in terms of population, but we are moving in the right direction, and it's made a huge difference. And one reason they've gotten there is because downtown projects have had the strong and enthusiastic support and advocacy of the downtown community, including especially the downtown neighborhood. The downtown neighborhood has been unique among central city neighborhoods in terms of their support for residential density downtown. We're out there we've been supporting residential projects downtown since day one. I think it's very significant that it's very important to have a council member in District 9 who places some value on having residential density in the central city. And I think we all know which of us places a serious value on that. We have disagreed very publicly in many cases over basic questions of whether we ought to be allowing additional density. One that I would point out, even though it's not quite downtown, it was in West Campus, and I think it's instructive. We had a zoning case involving the UT Co-op, a lot owned by the UT Co-op, which had a historic building there on the corner of 23rd and Nueces, and they'd already gotten permission to move that 8 feet closer to the street, but they wanted to allow a residential high-rise to go up in the heart of West Campus, a residential high-rise there in a very appropriate place. But the problem was they had to take the historic zoning off that surface parking lot. I'm a historian. I love historic property. I have an old house and everything, but that surface parking lot didn't strike me as being all that historic. And I place a real value on getting more residents downtown in any place where they can walk to their destinations. It would have meant, by the estimates we have, it would have meant 300 more beds than we would get if we didn't take the H off. It wasn't even a close call. I supported that. Unfortunately, Councilmember Tobos and other on the council opposed it, and so that surface parking lot is still zoned historic.
So when I think of downtown, I think of the area that we're in right now. And we have a lot of really high-end apartments and condos going up down here. And part of my concern is that the people who live in these apartments and condos may not work in this area, since the largest employer down here is the state of Texas, and I work for the state. I know they don't pay that great. So what I'm seeing and hearing there's a little disconnect between the greatness of density. If you're going to have density in an area, you need to have it so that people can walk to their business, walk to their home. Sort of everything's right there, located centrally. And I think we have a little bit of disconnect with that. I would like to see more buildings built, but of moderate income. And I'm not really clear how I can make a builder do that, because they all want to maximize their profit. But I feel like we're driving a lot of the mix in our downtown out of our downtown and maybe to Round Rock or Pflugerville. So.
Is your mic working? Yeah, it doesn't
Doesn't help I have a cold, so my voice is going on me anyway. Although the housing purchase market is red hot, few candidates across the city are discussing the rental market. Using the 2014 city housing market analysis, 66% of renters chose to rent and live in Austin rather than outside of the city. Based on 2010 census data, District 9 includes 72% renters. Furthermore, Austin rents have skyrocketed 43% higher over the past decade. As Austin continues to grow population, how do you propose to address affordability in the rental market that serves the majority of the city's population?
Great question. It's a huge issue. And what you have to realize is the single biggest driver of the cost of our housing, apartment housing in particular, is the balance between supply and demand. A few weeks ago, there was an article in the business section of the Statesman. I hope you all saw it about the fact that finally we're starting to see some leveling off of the rates of the apartment rents. And if you look at the explanation, it's all about supply. We're putting record numbers of units on the ground. We have 17,000 units in the pipeline right now. We got 7,100 on the ground last year. We got 6,100 coming this year. That is the key, getting more units on the ground. And I've been doing everything I can to try to make sure we do even better at that. There is a strong interest among many people in living smaller, living closer, and driving less than we have allowed in the past. Those are keys not only to meeting the housing issues that we have, but to addressing sustainability in the city, to provide those opportunities for living smaller, living closer, and driving less. And I've been working actively on all of those things. I've introduced resolutions to promote micro units, to promote tiny houses, to promote accessory dwelling units, everything I can to get more options on the ground. Unfortunately, I faced significant opposition at every step from some of my colleagues on the council. Because we are talking about significant change, and it is hard. But I do think it's important that we shift gears, provide more options. And if you look at our comprehensive plan, that's exactly what we're supposed to be doing. Our comprehensive plan that we did 2 years ago, one of the things that it noted was that we have a very limited supply of housing options, and we've got to do a better job of getting a diversity of housing types all across the city. I have been working hard at doing that, and I think if we can get more options out there, that you will see a real improvement in the affordability situation. And one more thing I got to say about affordability downtown, it is a very real issue, and I'm proud that downtown is the one neighborhood in town that stepped up and said, we want workforce housing here, and that's why it's under construction right now. That doesn't happen in other neighborhoods, but it happens downtown because we want affordability and diversity, and we're going to keep working for it.
Thank you. Ms. McGann?
I agree with Chris on the building of micro units and I think they were calling them granny flats and other auxiliary small dwellings. I'm concerned about driving the families out of town. I personally wouldn't want to live in a micro unit with a couple kids, and maybe even not with just my husband. So we need to make sure that we are building different levels of affordable housing. So if we have micro units, that's fantastic, but it's not going to accommodate families downtown. And so we need to make sure that we're building 2 and 3 bedrooms units as well, so that we can accommodate the whole shebang of what we want living in Austin.
Thank you.
Thanks. Well, it's a great question, and we have thousands of units coming online. So that will certainly open up some new options. And for the record, I certainly support downtown density. I support building in areas where it's been identified for that kind of increased density. And almost all of our neighborhood plans that have come through the council do identify areas for multifamily housing, for other kinds of development. So one of the things that I would suggest is that we focus more on affordable housing preservation. We've got aging structures all over town that are affordable, but will be converting into more expensive housing if we don't get active and really work toward preserving them. I had several resolutions last year aimed at a registration program that would have helped, 1, ensure safer housing, and 2, help us develop a relationship with those property owners that might need some help in preserving those units. The other thing is that we need to, when we have tools at our disposal as a city, we need to use them. We had years where there was a downtown density bonus program in place, and 0 developers used it because they could instead go to the council and ask for a rezoning to cure. And on votes of 6 to 1, this was before I was on council, one after another, my opponent included, the council voted on a majority vote to allow those developers to go through, get their cure rezoning to achieve the kind of density they wanted without going through the downtown density bonus program that would have included an affordable housing contribution. When we had a discussion with the Taco PUD, planned unit development that was coming through council, they looked at the planned unit development ordinance and decided the affordable housing contributions were higher than they wanted to pay. Well, this council, on a vote of 5-2, again with my opponent voting for it, decided, one, to pause that project, rewrite the planned unit development ordinance to substantially lower the developer's contribution, and then allow that project to progress further. So really, if we're serious about affordable housing, we need to use the tools that we have available to us, and then hold developers accountable to developing within those programs.
Thank you. I have one more question. We'll start with Ms. McGann. This one's a little long and I wrote it, so it's my fault. The Optico's consultant team noted 10 key findings in its diagnosis of Austin's current land development code. Including these 10 issues for consideration were ineffective base zoning districts, competing layers of regulations, complicated opt-in, opt-out system, lack of housing affordability and choice, and a code that is too centered around cars, and the current code isn't always in line with Imagine Austin. What are 3 specific changes to Austin's land development code you would like to see come out of the code next process? And if you don't have 3, that's okay. You can have 2 minutes.
Thank you. So, thank you for giving me the most complicated question, or at least it's the most complicated to me because I have not read the entire code, and I apologize for that. But we do need to absolutely I think the major thing we need to do is bring our code in compliance with what we're trying to do. Anybody here who has tried to work just on a basic project on your house and needed to work with code compliance, you know it's very difficult. You can get multiple different answers from multiple different people and contradictory answers, and that happens to businesses too. You all may remember there was a big article in the paper about the Alamo Draft House project where they were told, okay, you're ready to go. You don't have to pay $100,000, and then they got there to start and they were told, no, we need your $100,000. Things like that make it entirely too complicated to build in Austin for anybody. I mean, this could be your fence or it could be a multi-unit complex. People are having the same basic problems. We need our code to be simple, we need it to be easy to understand, and we need to train the people who are enforcing it so that we're all on the same page and we all know what's going on. You only get one from me, sorry.
Thank you. Councilmember Tobin.
Thanks. So I think our code is maybe 4 volumes or 5 volumes. It takes up about that much area on my bookshelf, so it is tough to read through the whole thing. But it's, I think, I'll name mine. Plain language. I think very clear plain language would be a help. A very clear navigational system, both online and in the text itself, would make it far more user-friendly. And really the goal is to make it user-friendly, not just for those who are paid to do this day in and day out and represent different clients, but for the homeowner who wants to have a simple addition to be able to understand what the code is and be confident that he or she is performing that addition in an appropriate and compliant manner. And then third, eliminate inconsistencies. I'm fully supportive of moving forward with a code that does those things. I do absolutely believe, though, that the code needs to recognize some of the hard-won compromises of the past years of zoning. And so the new code should absolutely give life to the spirit of Imagine Austin and the goals contained within, but it should also be fully in sync with our neighborhood plans and the other provisions that have been important, very important to preserving quality of life and the really unique and wonderful character of all of Austin's neighborhoods.
Thank you.
The CodeNext consultants have told us what we already knew. Our code is a mess. In fact, they will tell us that it is about the worst that they have ever seen. And our code is such a mess, our own staff can't apply it. It is confusing, it is unwieldy, it's enormous, it's just very difficult to apply. We have got to overhaul it, and we ought to be on the same page that major changes are needed. There are 3 changes in particular that I think do offer a lot of promise for Austin. One is a move in the direction of form-based codes. And that is a weird jargony thing, but it actually is critically important. Part of the problem we have with our code, and the reason it's so complicated, is because it's based on use-based designations, and you wind up with these long alphabetic acronyms that go on forever and make no sense to anybody, and give you no sense of what a building would actually look like if it took shape in accordance with those requirements. A form-based code is much simpler. It uses pictures instead of words. It's not just about rewording the language we have there. It's actually just setting out a picture. Just give us a picture of what we expect to see there. That way neighborhoods can know what they're going to get. Developers know exactly what's expected. The entitlement process can be virtually automatic. That would be a huge step forward, and the consultants we have are the leading national experts on getting exactly that kind of code in place. And that's been what's been so successful in cities like Miami, Denver, and Cincinnati. They've been winning awards based on doing that. Another thing that I'm hopeful that we'll see with the revision of the land development code is new rules that will make it much easier to get some meaningful infill on our corridors. Right now, it's very difficult to develop on our corridors because of a combination of parking requirements, drainage requirements, and compatibility requirements. Hopefully, with a new form-based code, the governing development on our corridors, it will be much easier to get neighborhood-friendly infill on those corridors in a way that our commercial design standards really haven't. Most of the projects that are going forward on those standards actually require alternative compliance. It just doesn't work, and we ought to be able to do better. And then the third thing I hope we'll see is a much better a way of dealing with the missing middle of housing types, and that's the product that's missing between the corridors and the single-family neighborhoods behind them. Austin has never been very good at that, partly because our regulations are so obtuse. And I'm very hopeful that with a new revamped code in place, that we'll do much better at providing a great variety of housing options between these corridors and the neighborhoods that they surround.
Thank you. That's all of my questions. Does anyone in the audience have a question they'd like to ask? Yes, sir.
Is there anything that the city can do to encourage more large trucks to get off of I-35 and onto SH-130? I understand the state owns it and the state sets the rates for it, but is there anything the city can do to help that?
We are continuing to have conversations about that, and yes, we ask that all the time. And what we hear from TxDOT and from consultants who work on that is that the truck traffic really is not that big of a contributor to the peak hour congestion that you see on I-35. And it kind of makes sense when you think about it. If you're a commercial truck driver, you're not going to choose to drive through downtown Austin during those peak hours. And what the commercial truck drivers do is they'll go around, they'll wait till the middle of the night, the off-peak hours, and that's when they go through downtown. The real problem that we have on I-35, most of that traffic, they'll tell us something like 85% is local traffic. We have met the enemy, and it's us. People are so car dependent that it's local folks going to and from, and that includes folks all over the region using I-35 coming in. That's who's using I-35 at peak hours. So I'm with you in spirit in wanting to get more trucks off I-35, but I just want to caution you that it's really not a panacea because we still have that problem of the peak hour congestion for those who live right here in the
Anyone else like to answer? Orange shirt.
Yes. I guess this is a question primarily for the two candidates on the end, being in support of urban rail development. I'm hearing a lot that it's a piece of the puzzle and it will help solve our congestion problem in conjunction with a lot of other options. However, $1 billion does take a lot of other options off the table. And a question that was posed earlier is, what is the significant difference of urban rail compared to the other options? And what justifies that $1 billion 10-year investment compared to some of the other options that are taken off the table by that investment?
Yeah, I mean, certainly some of the discussions that were compelling for me, some of the reasons that were compelling for me were the ability to transport larger numbers of people more quickly, more consistently, in a dedicated way. That those make it a more appealing option for some people who might not otherwise take public transportation, but also it makes it a consistent and fast option that allows for the transport of many people, and that's where we'll really start to see some of our benefits in terms of reducing traffic.
First, just that it is a very expensive system, or any rail system is going to be expensive. And this one, it's actually from a local standpoint, the rail pieces that we're approving, that we're considering in November is actually $600 million. There is a $400 million road piece, but the local contribution is $600 million, and that is contingent upon receiving federal funding for at least 50%. So if we don't get at least half 50% federal funding, the rail project won't go forward. So still a lot of money, but not $1 billion on rail, at least for this initial starter line. As I mentioned, the big advantages that rail offers over a bus or other alternatives is capacity, that it has a higher capacity than the bus systems. You just can't run the buses frequently and enough to meet the demand that we hope to see using the corridor. And secondly, I do think there is some value associated with the type of development that we would be likely to see in the nodes all along the corridor, that we would see with a rail investment. I think it's very likely that we would see meaningful transit-oriented development at the nodes, like Highland, Hancock, the St. David's area, the medical school, and then on out I-35, on out East Riverside, through downtown East Riverside. East Riverside, of course, is the #1 corridor. I think we're all in agreement on that. Huge potential for additional improvements on East Riverside, and I just don't think you're going to see the level of investment or improvements along East Riverside that with bus or any alternatives that we are likely to get with rail.
Thank you. Then in the middle, in the back. Yes, sir.
Do you support repealing the ban on plastic bags? I'll start with Aaron McGann.
I do not. I do not support repealing that. As far as I can tell from the information that I've received, that has been successful in keeping plastic bags from rolling around the city. Although I do have to say that I have a harder time picking up dog poop in my backyard because I have to go find the bag at one of the dog parks.
Yeah, I don't support repealing the ban either. I think it's been a very good thing. And it's certainly, I'll acknowledge it's certainly been a lifestyle adjustment for lots of people. I've had to run back to my car too and grab tote bags. I'm always grateful for the little signs at HEB that say, have you remembered your bags? And I've had to pile things in my purse a lot of times. So, I know it's been a hard transition for many in our community, but I would agree that I think that the evidence is that it's made a tremendous difference in reducing the amount of bags floating around, and also the amount of bags going to our landfill. And anecdotally, I've had people stop me in various places around town and say, I wasn't a fan of that ban. I was really irritated when you guys passed it, but I was out on a creek cleaning and we really noticed the difference. And I think when I started to hear from people who weren't supportive, that they had changed their mind, that showed me that beyond the evidence that we get from Bob Gethard of Austin Resource Recovery, that as a community, we're starting to really see the benefits of it.
I agree with that. I'm proud of our city's leadership on that issue and on other issues related to zero waste. And I want to note that this is not some crazy council initiative that came out of nowhere. The reason we were able to get that ban in place was with the active support and hard work of our zero waste community here in Austin. And I'm so proud of our local leaders who really made it possible to make that kind of progress. And I want to note that we have at least a couple of the leaders here in this room, Andrew Dobbs and Eric Goff, and others who really helped us blaze a trail on that, and I greatly appreciate all of the hard work that they, and it's not just the leaders, they have worked with, this was truly a broad-based community effort, and council really just acknowledged that and respected the judgments that were being made on the part of the community, and that really is a lot of what our leadership on council is about. It's about working collaboratively with the whole community and working together to make sure Austin maintains a leadership role. That leadership is coming as much from the community here in Austin as it is from the council itself.
Let's take one more.
Hi, thanks so much for that. And I'm here as an individual, I'm not representing anybody, but I'm also I'm a trans driver. In fact, I rode the dealer twice today.
Right.
Yeah. My question is, what is the likelihood of getting some rerouting of buses in this town? Because we have a bus system that's designed for a college town and not for a big city. What is the likelihood of getting that done in the next month?
I'm happy to start off with the responses on that. I actually chair the Operations and Planning and Safety Committee at Capital Metro, so I'm very interested in the planning that we want Cap Metro to do. We actually do take a very careful look at our routes. In fact, 3 times every year, we make adjustments to our routes. And Cap Metro is actually very aggressive in identifying where the weaker routes are and making changes and cutting out the weakest routes and strengthening service where the demand is. I'm very happy to work with you or anyone to see what we can do further on that. But I want to assure you that is not something that's just that there will be a new idea to anyone at Cap Metro. They work very hard in fact, we've got Cap Metro staffer here. It is an ongoing effort. It goes on year round. We're always adjusting, and there is no doubt in further improvements that we can make. But I'll be happy to work with you to see what else we can do.
Ms. McGann?
I'll change the routes to whatever you want them to do.
Yeah, I mean, that's not something the council has direct control over, though we can certainly provide input and do so through our appointees on the Cap Metro board. And I'll say, you know, I believe that I would like to see certainly some changes on some of the routes. We hear all the time from people who want to see the buses run later, especially downtown and other areas where you have a lot of people coming downtown without an easy way of getting home, and a lot of people coming downtown to work without an easy way of getting back home. It is very important to continue this discussion with Cap Metro because and it harkens back to the discussion we had earlier about certain areas of our town not being accessible by bus routes, and it's an ongoing conversation, and I've had several conversations with Cap Metro representatives about that very issue, about if you don't have a route, you might not get the development of housing in a particular area, but if you don't have a certain number of residents out there, you might not get the bus route. So it's a little bit of a circular argument, let me say that. And so, it's one of the reasons why I don't believe we should make our housing investments based on pre-existing routes, because as you heard, they change.
Thank you very much. I'm glad all 3 of you could show up tonight.